Right. Welcome to another episode of the How to Do Your 20s podcast. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about big ideas, how to define them, how to find them, and how to actually go out and get them. And Maryna joins me, who's a big ideas coach, and you can find her more out about her on her website, beanidealeader.com. So first off, Maryna, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
I'm so excited to be here. It's very exciting.
So how did you become a big idea coach? How did you get started in this?
So I started it was an accident, I would say, but I think it meant a whole life-changing experience for me. Um, in 2008, I lost my job, my corporate job in finance, and I used to do project management, and I also have a computer science degree. So I've done a lot of big projects before that for big corporations. So basically, I was out of job and I was just doing nothing. And I had a chance, like I had a coffee with my friend who had an idea. And she was saying her biggest challenge was to start it. Well, she had an idea while a lot of people around her saw that she can do it. She almost like for 5 years couldn't move from talking to doing. And I had this aha moment. I was like, well, I'm doing nothing right now. How about I'll be your project manager just on smaller scale, more creative scale. And I think that's where I started to do project management for creative people. And eventually it translated that I can take any idea and treat it as a project and make it happen. And I know it sounds really obnoxious, but I pretty much can start on any idea without, I had no experience in theater, or I do a lot of websites, or studying different kinds of companies. I help people to really take the big idea and start it based on where they at in life. Because I know not everybody can quit their job, and for some people, it's not, maybe not a way. Some people actually work on the ideas for first couple years. It's a full-time job while they developing the ideas.
It's funny because a lot of people do. They talk about their big idea over, and you hear it for years and years, and it's finally like, okay, someone needs to shake them out of it and say, you either need to do this or stop talking about it. And I want to talk
Right.
about more about that in just a little bit. But first, your ebook, it talks about how ideas are like elephants. So why are ideas like elephants?
Well, that's, you just gave me the answer, because that's what it is. It's a light bulb when you like have a aha moment. But when it comes to doing, as you just said, some people just keep on talking and it's just sitting in a room. It's a big elephant in a room, some sort of. It's beautiful, it's big. And I'm not saying all of the elephants literally not movable, but it's like they're so big. It was just kind of a fun idea. My designer back then, like almost 5 years ago, came up, and I'm like, wow, this is true. It is like an elephant
Yeah.
at the beginning. For some people, there are people, and there are a lot of different people. There are people who have ideas and they can do it. So their idea is a light bulb. For the rest of us, idea can be so big that it's actually scary at the beginning.
I think a lot of people, when they have that big idea, they don't really have it well defined. They don't really know exactly the specifics.
Right,
They know, I want to go do this. Do you have any tips on figuring out what your big idea is and
right.
defining it?
I think my advice on this will be, I would gonna say that you have to break it down your idea to a smaller chunks. Because also what I experienced a lot with my clients, they might have an idea and they eventually will get to doing it, but it may be not what they want. And I think a lot of people have a fear of this, like, well, I have this big dream, let me just dream about it. It makes me feel good. Because when you get to doing, it actually takes away dream from you. But I want to say, I'm going to come back. So basically, there's the two things about big ideas. First of all, you have to figure out, I'll give you an example with this one woman show. So nothing wrong about thinking big and dreaming big. I think we shouldn't take away this from people. But for some people, it actually makes them paralyzed. So my client, everybody tell her, well, you can be this, wherever comedian, and you're gonna make billions of dollars, and you're gonna be so famous. She got paralyzed. I said, don't worry about it. How about we take this big idea? How about you just create one woman show, just 45 minutes. You perform in front of 100 people, and that's it. This is your big idea. And I honestly come up with this concept just very intuitively, but I've seen for a lot of people that it works, especially who have big ideas, right? Who have big ideas and cannot move forward.
Mm.
Because what's happening right now to this comedian, yes, she actually became big, and she did around 300 shows all over US, in India, and she moved back to India because this is where she's originally from. She's getting TV show happening for her. She just did like a web series episode, very successful, book proposal. Honestly, 5 years ago, if I told her that, she would never even wrote one woman show, because you actually have to be ready for your big idea and you have to start it small. So what I'm saying is that you have to take your big idea and you have to figure out how to break it down into a smaller one to start with.
That makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of power in thinking about something really big that you want to do to kind of get you motivated to do it, but it could
Right.
also be at the same time paralyzing. It's like I've had that in my own life where it's like, I want to quit my job and start an online business. It's like, holy crap, I don't know how to do any of this. And then it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, how about I create a website? If I can create a website and then I try to get some people there and then I try to get some
Yeah.
sales and the
Yeah.
same kind of progression.
One of the things I was just talking today to one of my clients as an example, after 5 years of coaching, I just really start understanding, and I'm doing a lot of coaching, what I really want to do as a coach, what is really motivates me, because I'm as a human also constantly evolving and developing, but it takes a lot of doing before you really would understand yourself.
What have
You
you,
know,
yeah,
go
what
ahead.
did you find that motivates you then?
What's my clients?
Mm.
I think I have a one client. I told him yesterday we've been together like it sounds like we're in relationships. He has a girlfriend. We 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 worked together so well for past 4 years and we've accomplished so much. But he was really consistent with me where I really felt like quitting. And I think, he like people's ideas, and if they get back to me with actions, that keeps me motivating. I think the biggest things what gives me energy is seeing people being action oriented and seeing the results, seeing my clients' successes, because I feel like for me it's my success.
A big excuse everybody I talk to, and I know that you've had the same excuse given to you a lot, is I don't have time. How do you
Yeah.
help people overcome this excuse?
So there's a great exercise. I do this a lot with clients. People need to do for a week, track how they spend their time. One of the biggest discoveries for me was I used to do a lot of one-on-one meetings, and I would go to people like they say, "Oh, I want to meet uptown," or "I want to meet downtown." So I figured out that almost 10 hours a week went to just going to places. So for some people, maybe, they spending too much watching TV. For some people, they will have to quit gaming. There's something will have to uh, they will have to stop doing it. It's not gonna, it's actually, you have to understand how you're spending your time, then you're gonna create a time.
Across all your clients, is there like a number one thing that you see that people are wasting their time with? Is it like perhaps television, or do you see
Well,
some kind of, yeah?
Radhika's was a comedian one. Hers is TV. She literally had to quit TV. She even talks about it. you know TV, some people spending too much, for women it's housework, so you kind of have to start hiring people. Traveling, I mean, just big distraction for all of us right now, social media. So I want to get back and add two more things about how to find the time. So first, you need to cut something off of your life. And don't be discouraged that you only can do 2 3 hours a week. So what's happened, let's say you have 3 hours a week for your idea, big idea. So multiply by 4, it's 12. If you multiply, no, it's 8. So anyway, it's around more than 100 hours a year. Trust me, something big will happen if you dedicate 100 hours in a year. And it's just starting with 3 hours.
And I've known from my own personal life that if
Yeah.
I just start really small, do like 3 hours a week or something like that, as it goes on, I tend to find that I have more time too, because that's what I did. That's what I've been doing with the podcast. Even is at first it's like, all right, I'll spend like an hour or two a week, and then as it starts to grow and evolve into its own thing, I've become motivated to want to spend more
Yeah,
time. So
yeah,
I completely agree with you. Starting
right.
small is the key.
Yeah. I feel like small actions are much better than big words. It
Absolutely.
has to be, it's it's transformational. It's really transformational.
Another excuse I know a lot of people tell you when they're first starting out with you is they feel like they don't know enough about whatever the subject is.
Yeah,
They want to go back to school. How do you
yeah.
help them overcome that?
So usually when people come to me with ideas, they already have some knowledge. They don't think they do, but they really do. And this is, I've seen this in so many people. That's remember what I started with is like, oh, I can help you execute any idea. It's not because I have a knowledge about this topic or subject. It's actually people do. And because I want them to start small, right? Obviously, I'm not going to say, oh, you're going to become a doctor without having a degree. But I would say, like, as you said, oh, I don't know anything about online businesses, but let me build a website. So basically, it's usually this big idea. They have a lot of passion about it. So the passion will take them to get out the knowledge they already have and then also gain a new knowledge. I've had people, who've never done podcasts and, they like after 60. I think for us it's a little bit easier to learn things. And, I had people like they went online and they learned something, you take some class, but you're not going to get a degree.
Yeah.
Get a degree probably if you've done like for a couple of years and you proved it to yourself, oh, this is it. This is what I really want to do. And then you're gonna do it. I have a client who is building an app and she's never done it. She's never done it. She's in a whole completely different industry. And I think to do something you've never done it and do it without education, it's the best way to get to know yourself.
Yeah, I think that I spent 4 years getting a degree, and then I
Yeah,
got a job after college, and my degree did not prepare me at all for it.
yeah,
And it's from scratch. I had to learn all, and I did. I taught myself all the new skills to get that new job, and then I quit
right.
that job, and once again, it's like from scratch, starting over. But it's not. The knowledge is out there, and I'm a big fan of. You don't need to go necessarily to get a degree. It's you can if you don't know how to build a website, go online. Don't get a degree in how to website design.
Yeah,
Just take the first small steps. I love that.
right. Right. It's a, I mean, again, I have another client who he never went to college, but he works for big clients like Martha Stewart, and it's all came from him being dedicated to educating himself all the time and growing. But it's like it's a very like thin line between you can be learning all your life and do nothing about it.
Hmm.
It's this beautiful balance is learning and doing,
Yeah. And
you
it's
know?
funny, yeah, knowledge can also become somewhat paralyzing. Because when I first
Yeah.
was looking to start the website, I read a lot of different things, and it's like, oh, your site needs to have this, this, and then this, and this. And
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, I don't want to release it until it's perfect. And
Yeah.
then it's never going to, first off, it's still not
It's
perfect, and it's
never going
been
to
two
be
years.
perfect now.
Exactly. You also
Well,
talk about,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting.
no, no, no.
One of the thing is, it's another whole different concept. Like again, it's not going to sound sexy, but how you can be okay with sometimes delivering something that average at first. It's any creative art act, any idea, it's creativity. It's like, how do you just ship it and you embarrassed and you still showing to people? This is the biggest accomplishment of your life if you can do that.
I
Biggest accomplishment.
I agree completely. I've talked about this quote many times on the podcast, but one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to paraphrase it here, but basically it was a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who said that if your first iteration of your app, website, whatever, if you're not embarrassed by it like a
Yeah,
year later, you took too long. And I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Well, look at iPhone. It was horrible at
Yep.
first. Nobody wanted, but it's horrible. I mean, I have an iPhone, but it still has some glitches. So it's people forget about it. I mean, it's a little bit of culture we live in. We're really concentrated on successes. People don't talk about mistakes,
Yeah.
because it's painful and we don't want to experience pain. Yeah, but it's part of life.
In the ebook that you have, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes so
Right.
people can get it's a free ebook. You talk about focusing on your strengths. What do
Yeah.
you what do you mean by focusing on your strengths?
So basically, I think I talk about, so everybody, like, let's say, I think I give an ex I wrote this a while ago. There is a whole book you can figure out. I sometimes forget even that I wrote it. So strengths, there's a lot of books you can find out about your strengths. Like, let's say, I hate marketing, right? I can decide to push myself and work on it, or I can hire someone. So there's always opportunity to grow, but sometimes, like, especially at the beginning, when you start in with your big idea and you have so much doubt in yourself, it's better to see what is this you're good at. If you're good with technology and writing, then yeah, you can write your blog yourself. But maybe if you're in fashion and you're better at designing clothes, and writing and technology is not your strengths, maybe you can find somebody else who can do it for you. So basically, especially at the beginning, it's important to be in a flow of doing, and it's already very vulnerable process. So let's do something you're good at first. And yes, 5 years later, right now, I'm looking into getting better at marketing. Like, yes, I hired people before, but now I'm like, I think it's time for me to push myself a little bit. But again, when you're at the beginning with your big idea, you actually should be really gentle with yourself.
I found that to
Because,
be totally
yeah,
true. It was hard for me because once again, when I was first starting the website, people were telling me, "Oh, you need to split test this and this, and you should test your idea." And I dreaded doing all this stuff, but I enjoyed building the website. I enjoyed this other stuff, and I finally came to the conclusion: instead of spending, tens of hours working on the stuff I hate, why not work on the stuff I like? And then maybe the stuff that people are telling me I need to do isn't even as important as I think it
right.
is. And I found that out, after the fact.
One of the reasons I want to add something to what you just said, what's interesting, I think one thing, again, intuitively, because when I start my business eventually, like it's got to the point of being a business, I start working with different business coaches. And some of the advices, I couldn't take it. And I'm really happy I didn't, because it was not something that worked for me back then. I wasn't ready for that advice.
Yeah.
So it's really important for people, if especially when they're at the beginning, is do not take all of the advices and do only what you can do.
I like it.
So basically, she came to me like, well, somebody told her about, you got to be, if you love what you do, you're going to be excited about marketing. And I said to her, what does it mean excited? Like, I love what I do, but I'm not excited about marketing. So this is just an example. You have to filter every advice people given to you, because it might work for 100 people, but it not might not work for you.
And another thing I kind of want to add on that I found is experts aren't always experts. Like a lot of the books I was reading said you need to do this, this, and this. And then once I started building my own online store, I realized actually some of the advice they gave wasn't as good as I thought it was. And
Right.
especially today with the internet, anybody can have a website and say, "Hey, you need to do this." And I think a lot of people put a lot of they believe everything that's on there, and that's not always true. I think sometimes it's important to find out for yourself what's important.
Right. Right. Cool.
You,
This is good.
in the ebook, you also talk about how size matters and the size of your ideas are extremely important. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
So basically, again, somebody will want to start nonprofit and somebody just want to write a blog, you know, but it can be a still big idea for both people. It's still a big idea for them, because it's more something, for me, big idea, it's something that nagging you for a really long time. And at some and one phase in your life, it can be, yes, writing a book, and another one, it's going to be just like creating one workshop. So it's always going to be different, but it's pretty much it's something like, I wanted to go to India for 5 years, and it kept coming back to me, till eventually I did it. But it was my big idea, and it's never disappeared. It just didn't go away. I never knew how I'm gonna make it happen. But eventually, I mean, of course, I created a plan, and then, I went. But that's what's big idea for me in terms of size. It's just for everybody, it will be different. But it's more like, I don't want to sound new age, but it's like almost like your purpose in life. It's something that will help you to get to know yourself better, or to find that, for me, this coaching became something, sometimes I feel like I'm so tired that I don't want to do anything, but I can just, if I need to coach, I'll coach, and I'll be happy. It will make me happy. But again, it's usually, I've seen people with ideas, big ideas, it becomes a purpose in life. It helps them to understand themselves better. And it can be as small as just, starting a blog.
It seems like the common thing that holds people back from going after these big ideas is fear.
Hmm.
And can you talk a little bit about how fear holds us back and how we can kind of overcome it?
This is one of my favorite topics. You cannot overcome fear. You can make friends with fear. I'll give you an example. My personal example, I think I give this example in um, my ebook. English is my second language, and I always did really well one-on-one, but I caught myself a lot. I would be in the company of people, and I would lose them. They would just smile, but I knew they have no clue what I'm talking about. And eventually, I joined Toastmasters, for public speaking, where, you know, you make mistakes publicly, and then people will give you, in a really nice way, constructive criticism, but it's still criticism. And, you know, I was just recently I had like 50 people workshop on goal setting. And I told them that 5 years ago, I would never be able to do that. Forget about making jokes. And I had so much fear of public speaking, but I just started small in a very safe environment. So basically, there is no escape from fear. It's actually doing something that you're afraid of in the very small steps, constantly. I mean, I still have a little bit of fear of public speaking, and probably if I have 5,000 people, I would be scared to death. My first speech, I thought I'm just gonna die. And not kidding. I couldn't breathe. And I said, if I'm gonna have a heart attack, I will never come back to public speaking. So there is no escape really. There is really figuring out the way of, like for instance, I want to be a surfer, and I'm afraid to surf. It's funny. I'm afraid of water. I'm not strong enough. So I'm actually doing push-ups every day. Every day I'm doing push-ups. So I'm becoming strong, and I'm working on my core. 8 minutes a day. This is how I'm working on my fear.
I love
There's
it.
no way. There's no way to escape it. I think I'm gonna say bullshit to overcome it. I think you have to find a way how to become one with fear.
I like it.
Then it's
Yeah,
becoming your friend.
yeah. I've always kind of said it's kind of like jumping off a high dive. For me, that quitting my job was kind of like jumping off the high dive. The first time you jump off the high dive, it's scary. The
Yeah,
second time, it's kind of cool. By the third time, you're loving it, and you're still you take a week off and
yeah,
you come back to it, and it's still scary, but you realize, hey, this is can actually be my friend. This fear is actually sometimes kind of what makes life living. I feel like if
right,
you were never afraid of surfing, for instance, you'd go do it. It'd be kind of boring, but when you
right,
can fear it and overcome it, I think there's something extremely powerful with that.
right. And I think it's like one of the things, I know not everybody can do this, and I feel that's why I always give like small examples that you start really small. You gotta start something small. Maybe you don't start with the Toastmasters, but you give a speech to three of your friends.
Yeah.
I have a client who is afraid to put in her writing, to the world, and I said, okay, why don't you just write first and then share with three friends? but it's kind of you gotta do something about it.
Gotcha. So I want to kind of shift gears here a little bit and talk just some quick questions that I have. And one question I have for you is, what common problems do you see your clients running into so that stop them from being able to achieve their big ideas?
Well, sometimes life happens, meaning like people get married, people have children, and it's all good stuff. Sometimes it's a health issue. So usually it's like we have a very specific dynamic of work. So they get like in a almost like they have their own routine happening. And, so there's certain hours you need to do X, Y, Z. So basically, sometimes they just falling off of this train of productivity. But then what's happened, if this idea really meant to be executed, they usually come back. It's almost like idea has its own life on its own. If it's meant to be executed, people get married, things happen, then they get settled down, and then they go back to working on the idea. Maybe with a little bit different schedule. So one of the things, tricks I'm teaching my clients, life never going to be the same. Always something going to be changing. What worked, it can work some schedule for 2 months, then something happened, and you have to plan it again. So one of the biggest thing you have to do constantly is planning. You know how they say, I think plans are critical, planning is essential, which is plans are, I think Winston Churchill said, they're useless. Plans are useless. I think they're not. Plans are useless and planning is essential, which is true. Planning has to be part of your life. So then if you fall off of the track, then you can quickly go back and just create a whole new way of being productive. It's never the same. That's why I don't believe in 1 year goals. You can have an intention,
Well,
but
you
you
were
cannot have a
talking about,
goal.
yeah, well, you were talking about that. I was actually thinking of that exact same quote, and I love that. And I agree with you. Plans do have some value, but I think the planning process is way more valuable because I constantly make new plans, and then I
Yeah,
realize, oh, wait a minute. For instance, I want to move. Actually, like I plan on going somewhere, and then I get there, and I'm like, you know what? It's actually not as great as I think it's gonna be. Or I
right.
realize that there's obstacles in the way, but it's like once you see that new obstacle, I think there's two approaches. You can follow the plan and just hit your head against the obstacle, or make a new plan. And I've always thought that's a great quote.
Yeah, you actually have to constantly create a new plan. And I think we always feel like, oh, it's wasting. But in project management, actually, almost 45% it's a planning. They do a lot of planning because everybody have to have a clear direction what they're doing. So
Absolutely.
planning is important. Yeah, so basically mainly for people what's happened is that they get, life can happen. So they get distracted.
And another question for you: what have you learned from coaching that you didn't know when you started? Is there anything that when you started you didn't realize, and then after a couple of years of coaching, you realized, hey, wait a minute, things are slightly different than I thought?
Well, biggest thing is planning.
Okay.
The planning one was discovery for me. Like I kind of knew, but it's like I came from a very structured environment. And I think that's life can happen, things can fall apart, and people like work hard on a project and then they have to stop. But what I knew is that like what I've learned with experience that they can come back to it and start planning again. And I think fear, I didn't know about fear. So
Okay.
yeah, is it so basically what's I think fear for me is a big deal, personal discovery that I kind of, because when I start facing clients' fears, I really had to find a solution. And then also it became applicable for me.
Last question I have for you is: do you have any books that you recommend that all your clients read or the audience should read?
I love two books. I don't have it. I have one here. I'm gonna even show it. One of the biggest, I think I started my business with that book was by Seth Godin, Tribes.
Hmm.
That's one of my favorite. He actually like it's important to be ideal leader. And another one is this one here. I never can pronounce the
Flow.
name Flow.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite books. And funny enough, I've done coaching, the process I have. And then when I read Flow, it's like, I'm doing this already. But it's scientifically proven why it's important to be action oriented and having constantly feedback and like making plans. So that would be probably Seth Godin and Flow.
Yeah, those two books actually, I love both those books. I completely agree. I think I'm only halfway through Flow, but I've been told by so many people that it's good, and so far it's pretty good. I do have to
Yeah.
say the audiobook versions, the voice is a little dull, but the
Okay.
content's really good.
It's a book itself is a little bit it's like you have to push yourself get through. It's not a fun book to read, but it has a lot of good material in there.
Absolutely. Any last advice or tips for the listeners out there on how to achieve their big dreams, how to get their big dreams?
You got to start somewhere. It's just really simple. You just got to start somewhere, even if it's 30 minutes a week.
I,
Because we become by doing it, just really by doing it. And just take it as an experiment. What a big deal. So maybe it's not gonna work. But I think the worst thing in life is just to have an idea and never go after it. I think it's the worst thing. It's just that if you have an idea and you didn't try it, not to give a chance.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. And if you did, make sure you hit the big red subscribe button down below. You can also check me out on Facebook and on Twitter. And I release a new video every Monday. And by hitting that subscribe button, you'll get those new videos every Monday. And this is really a podcast. It's also a website. You can check out the website. It's howtodoyour20s.com. I'll put a link right over here as well. And what it's all about is trying to improve your life. And we specifically focus on things that people in their 20s are interested in. So make sure you like the video if you liked it, subscribe, like us on Facebook and Twitter, whatever. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again on another video.